All right, well, good morning all. It is, yes, it is 9 o'clock. So call the meeting to order. Well, welcome everyone here this morning. Kind of a blustery, breezy, dirty morning compared to yesterday. Yesterday was a nice one. Okay, so if rise as you're able, we'll sing the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Good, thank you. Martin, I believe you're on.
I
to do
believe
the
I
land
am. Good
acknowledgement
morning,
this morning,
Brian.
please.
Good morning. As we gather, we recognize and acknowledge the traditional keepers of this land with whom we share today. The Township of Southgate is a part of the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Six Nations of the Grand River, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, Haudenosaunee, and Saugeen Métis. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are as it reflects our histories, and may we live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples.
Thank you, Martin. Madam Clerk, is there anybody registered for open forum this morning?
None today.
Thank you very much. Need a confirmation of the agenda as presented. Jason will move that. Jim will second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any declaration of interest related to any item on today's agenda? Not seeing any. One should arise during the course of the meeting. You can, of course, declare it at that time. Delegations, we have PSD Citywide Incorporated here this morning to talk about 2025 proposed level of service. I see, is it Marissa online? Good morning, Marissa.
Yes, good morning.
There we go. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. I will be sharing my screen, so I'm just going to do that now. And you should see on your end a PowerPoint presentation shortly. Okay. So it looks like you guys can see that.
Yes, we
I
can.
will make it a little bit bigger and then we can get going. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So good morning and thank you everyone for having me today. My name is Marisa Benuelo Spencer and I'm an asset management advisor with PSD Citywide. I've been working closely with Southgate Township and your staff on your 2025 asset management plan, and with that, the proposed levels of service. And today I'm going to talk to you about the process for selecting proposed level of service options, as well as the outcome of the analysis. Now, before I do that, I'll touch base very briefly on what asset management is and what the legislation driving asset management within the province of Ontario is. So, what is asset management? Asset management at its most fundamental level is really about service management. It's about recognizing that municipalities are drivers of the provision of service for constituents, and that in so doing, there is a importance of maintaining our assets over time. When we think about what you've done today, for example, we can start to realize the fundamental role that assets play in the provision of service to residents. For example, this morning, you likely woke up and turned on your tap. That tap was providing water from the township. After that, you likely got in your car and drove on a road to get to the building that you're sitting in today. Both of those assets, the road that you drove on, the building that you're sitting in today, are assets that the township owns and are assets that provide services to the community. And so asset management is understanding from a very data-driven lens what assets you as a municipality own, and furthermore, key information about them. Understanding what is their current state, understanding what is their anticipated future needs, so that we can effectively and sustainably plan for them in the short as well as in the long term. Ontario Regulation 58817, that's the asset management regulation governing municipalities in the province. And this is likely something that you've heard to date. So this regulation was passed in 2018, and it has a series of key deliverables that municipalities must provide. Today, we're focusing on the 2025 deliverable, but before that, there was requirements for developing a strategic asset management policy, as well as asset management plans for your core and your non-core assets. The 2025 requirement focuses on developing what are called proposed levels of service, which are basically target performance levels for your assets, and discussing why the selected option is considered appropriate, specifically when considering factors such as risk, cost, achievability, and so forth. It also requires a understanding of what the cost of delivering that service is and a financial strategy to meet that cost. So you may be wondering, how do you go about developing proposed levels of service? What information do you look at and what are the steps involved? So for this project, we looked at 5 very key steps in the selection of a proposed level of service. The first step was a data collection and analysis step. This was a very data intensive stage, as the name might imply, which involved the collection and consolidation of the township's assets. This is over 1,200, or I should say 2,500 individual assets. So gathering the information on them, understanding key attribute data about them. So for example, for every asset, we sought to gather what the estimated cost to replace that asset is, what the estimated useful life of that asset is, meaning how long we would typically expect that asset to last, what the estimated condition of that asset is, as well as additional attributes for various assets, which may include things like traffic counts for your roads or the size of a pipe for your water, wastewater, and storm. From that stage, we were able to determine key information such as what is the replacement cost of the township's assets. We were also able to determine what is the condition of the township's assets, and importantly, what is the average annual requirement, meaning how much money do we need to, on average, save each year or spend each year in order to replace every single asset when it needs to be replaced and complete every single rehabilitation. So that was the first step. The second step was what we call a discovery session. And in this session, we sought to understand the values and desires of your residents, as well as counselors and key staff. To do that, we issued resident surveys in the spring of 2025. Those were available to residents in paper copy at the town office, as well as online on your website, as well as through social media. Those surveys sought to understand key information from residents regarding their experience with the township's infrastructure, as well as which assets they value most and their desired changes in service levels. Similar questions were brought forward to council, and for staff, we also sought their insight. This was particularly relevant to public work staff who are day in and out working on the assets and have a pretty intimate knowledge of them. In this session, we brought together those 3 key pieces of information to help us understand what is most important, what is the current state, and from that, we selected 3 proposed level of service options, which we'll discuss further today. The third scenario was the setup of those scenarios. So PSD modeled the parameter set for each option. That then gave us outputs with regards to the associated cost of each option, as well as the projected risk and condition of each option. We held a session with staff to review that analysis by option, and we'll discuss that today. The fifth and final step in developing proposed levels of service is to select one of the options. That option would become the proposed level of service, and the asset management plan would reflect that selection. So from here, I'm going to basically go into each of these parts. We'll start off with the asset data and going over some of the key pieces of information that we found in that step. So as I said earlier, we collected over 25 individual assets. We inventoried those assets in a central database, and we were able to then complete analysis on the assets. From that exercise, we were able to conclude that as of 2024 year end, the township has nearly $300 million worth of assets in inventory. Most of this cost is associated, as one might expect, with your bridges and culverts and your roads, with the other asset categories, buildings, waters, so on and so forth, representing the balance. We also looked at the condition of your assets. For condition, where we had assessed conditions, such as with your bridges, where there is a biannual bridge inspection, we used assessed condition. In the absence of that, we projected condition based on the asset's age relative to its anticipated useful life. And that all together helped us determine the overall portfolio condition. So as you can see in the graph on your right, most of the assets, in fact, over 80%, were in fair or better condition. Now, condition is a very dynamic measure. It's going to change over time. That change is going to be driven by the natural degradation of assets as they age, as well as any changes to asset condition as they're invested in. And so this condition reflects the condition of assets as of 2024 year end. The other factor that we looked at is what is the forecasted investment required? So this represents if we were to replace every single asset once it reaches its useful life, and if we were to complete every single recommended rehabilitation, that's mostly going to apply to your roads and your bridges, how much money on average do we need to save or spend so that we can meet those needs? This graph here, the bars, those are stacked bars, and they're reported in 5-year buckets. So that is the 5-year projected cost for the time frame noted. The red dashed line is the average annual requirement. So that's the average amount that, again, would need to be saved or spent each year to fund the need. So that was the first step, understanding current state and understanding key informational sources from that current state. The second step was the discovery session. So this session, the intention was to bring together key pieces of information from different areas. Those areas were looking at surveys, so working to understand what do residents value, as well as combining that with understanding of the inventory and understanding staff's experience with it. So as I mentioned earlier, a survey was conducted. This was made available to residents. It was posted online through your township's website, as well as through social media, and paper copies were also made available. From this, there was about a 5% household response rate, and that survey sought key information with regards to, again, residents' experience with infrastructure, their desired service changes in infrastructure, and their willingness to pay for those changes. Some key things that we found was that emergency services and roads were identified as the most important asset categories. The highest rate of dissatisfaction was noted for roads, followed by parks and recreation. When asked, do you want to decrease service levels, maintain them, or increase them by asset category, residents noted that they wanted to increase them for roads and bridges most, with parks and recreation following, and otherwise they wanted to maintain them. When asked, are you willing to pay for changes in service levels, most residents indicated that they were not willing or only somewhat willing to pay for improvements. However, the highest rate of willingness to pay for improvements was associated with roads, bridges, and stormwater. As many of you probably recall, we also issued a council survey, and that survey sought similar details from a councillor's perspective. what their constituents are telling them. And so what was indicated was that most counselors were moderately satisfied or very satisfied with the services delivered by the township and the associated communication provided by staff. From the complaints lens, residents mostly complained to counselors about roads, bridges, and culverts, followed by buildings and fleet. So we're starting to see some parallels in terms of what the resident survey told us and what the council survey told us. When we asked what the desire was to change funding and how, most counselors indicated that they wanted to increase funding to top priority assets first and identified top priority assets as roads, bridges, and stormwater. And all respondents indicated a willingness to increase taxes that ranged from 2 to 8% annually, most of which was between a 2 and 3%. We also surveyed key staff. In these surveys, we sought to understand their insights on the current level of service and their desired change in this level of service, as well as any anticipated barriers to delivery. And what we found was that roads was identified most as in need of improvement in terms of the service. And throughout all categories, it was noted that there's insufficient budget in terms, particularly from a capital standpoint. It was simultaneously noted that the identified need was most likely not realistic to implement in a very short period, and therefore a phased approach was likely the most suitable. And so when we looked at all of those sources of information and distilled it to what are the key messages that we're hearing, what are kind of the repeated messages that we're hearing, the key things were that roads and bridges are very important to everyone, whether it was residents or the counselors or staff, there was some consistency there. There was also a need to increase investment that was recognized, and concurrently with that, a noted kind of feasibility constraint to increase it to that average annual requirement amount. It was recognized that the inventory, meaning your assets, are expected to decline in condition under the existing funding levels. Simply, there is not the need for funding is much higher than the current amount of funding, and therefore asset failures are projected to become more frequent and severe over time if current funding levels continue. So based on all of those factors, we landed on 3 scenarios to explore. The first scenario was maintaining the current investment levels for everything except for your roads, bridges, and land improvements. And so for those assets, we looked at funding them at 70% of their average annual requirement. An average annual requirement represents the funds needed to replace every single asset when it reaches its useful life and to complete every single recommended rehabilitation. So in this case, we're funding most of it, that is 70% of it, rather than all of it. And for those non-priority categories, we're maintaining the current funding. The second scenario we looked at is to apply the current investment and to increase it 2% year over year until we reach that average annual requirement. For many assets, it took many, many years, in many cases decades, to reach that average annual requirement, simply because the funding levels right now are fairly low. The third scenario that we looked at was to model the investment of 70% of the average asset annual requirement across all categories. And that 70% would begin in year 1. So these next slides that I'll walk you through are going to start to present information on projected outcomes in terms of condition and risk by scenario. We'll show a few examples from some categories, but the important part here is to distinguish the general trends that we're seeing between each scenario and the projected outcomes from a risk and condition standpoint. So if we look at condition, we know that the asset investment need is not funded under any of the scenarios. So we're basically funding less than the need. And therefore, in the long term, the condition of the assets will decline. The higher the condition value, the better the condition the assets are in. And so what we see is in the short term, differences in condition between each scenario are quite minimal. differences in condition start to increase in the long term. And so we can see in the long term, scenario 1 provides the lowest outcome in condition compared to scenarios 2 and 3. That is, again, because over time, we're funding a higher percentage of the need under scenarios 2 and 3. So I'll show some examples of what this looks like if we were to graph it. Sometimes that can be a little bit easier to digest. And so you'll see some trends that keep appearing. And so this graph here is showing the projected changes in condition, in this case of your road network, over time based on the scenarios modeled. The blue line indicates if you were to invest 70% of that average annual requirement, again, that's scenario 1. So what you're going to see is the condition will decline over time. Logically, that makes sense because we're simply not investing all of the need. And so over time, more and more assets are kind of falling into poorer condition because they're not getting the investment they need. Scenario 2, which is to increase the current investment by 2% year over year. What you're seeing is basically initially the condition kind of drops a little bit, but then it increases over time as more and more of that need is met. You'll see a similar pattern with other asset categories in terms of the comparative differences between scenarios 1, 2, and 3. So in this case, this is showing you Storm. Storm is not receiving 70% of the needs. So we're basically maintaining the current investment for Storm, and we're seeing that it falls. Comparatively, if we were to increase it 2% a year, you'll see over time the condition improves compared to the other scenarios. And if we were to invest 70% of the need, the outcomes are basically between scenarios 1 and 2. And so again, the key thing here is to recognize the trends rather than fixating on any one number. And that trend is that if you maintain your current investment, the condition is going to decline. If you increase your investment to 70%, you will have better condition outcomes. And if you increase it year over year for 2%, in the long term, you will have better conditions than any scenario. We'll see that for some categories, condition will decline more severely than others. The differences in this decline are due to the current amount of the average annual requirement that's funded. So this graph here is showing the water network. This category is more severely underfunded than other categories. Therefore, if you maintain the current investment levels, it's going to fall in condition pretty rapidly. If you were to increase it 2%, it will be in better condition than current, but because it is so underfunded, it's going to take a long time for that investment need to be reached. Sorry, folks. Okay. And you'll see the same with wastewater as well, the same patterns here. So the other factor that we look at is risk. When we talk about risk, risk is a function of the probability of an asset failing multiplied by the consequence of the asset failing. So for every single asset within the database, we calculate risk. That is calculated based on specific attributes that that asset has. But most commonly for probability of failure, we're considering what is the condition of the asset. And then for consequence of failure, we're considering factors like what is the cost to replace that asset, how many people are affected. So for roads, we might look at traffic counts. For water, wastewater, storm, we might look at the size of a main. What we see is that in the short term, differences in risk between each scenario are quite marginal. In this case, risk is scored out of 25, with 25 representing the highest level of risk and 1 representing the lowest level of risk. So in the short term, the average risk across all scenarios would be considered low. In the long term, differences in risk become more notable, and we can see that scenario 1 has the highest risk on average, scenario 3 has the second highest risk, and scenario 2 has the lowest risk. And so you'll see that as well when we look at some examples in graphs. Again, we'll start to see kind of those differences by scenario. So this graph here is showing risk for the storm network. The blue line represents maintaining your current investment. So again, in this case, the higher the risk value, the more problematic that is. The lower the risk value, the less problematic that is. And so again, we see the same trends happening in terms of if you maintain your current investment, you're going to have more risk. If you increase your investment year over year, your risk will kind of dissipate over time. And if you invest at 70% of the need, your risk will generally be in between scenarios 1 and 2. This is an example from your water. Again, we're seeing the same patterns. Okay, so at this point, we've identified, if we kind of go back to the beginning, we identified what assets do you own. We then identified what do your residents value, what do councillors value as representative of your constituents, what are staff seeing in the field. Based on that, what are some scenarios that we can look at? We looked at those 3 scenarios, and then those 3 scenarios told us different outcomes in terms of condition and risk. The other element that we looked at is what is the financials associated with each of these scenarios. And the way that we analyzed that was we looked at what is the current investment that these assets sustainably receive. Sustainable investment sources would primarily be your taxes and your rates, as well as OSIF and CCBF funding. This is funding that's repeatable, controllable, and can be reliably anticipated and expected from one year to the next. It does not exclude any one-time grants. We also accounted for forecasted costs that benefit existing development based on your development charge background studies. Those are costs that cannot be covered by development charges and would have to be covered by the existing tax base. The analysis does not factor in inflation, so any of the adjustments to taxes or rates that would be required to support any of the options are net of inflationary impacts. For this analysis, we look at different phase-in periods, meaning implementing the change over 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years. This allows for generally more affordable options if necessary. So for the growth costs, we took the values from your development charge studies that were identified as benefits to existing development. We identified what asset categories that they belong to, and then we identified what the average annual investment is required over different time periods. We looked at this for tax-funded water and wastewater. And then from that, we were able to complete some financial analysis. So the next few graphs that I'm going to show you will reflect the total tax-funded increase required to meet each of the scenarios. It will also represent the phased-in amount on an annual basis. So if we were to implement this over 5 years, what the increase in taxes would be required if we were to implement this over 10 years, so on and so forth. So again, that first scenario is investing 70% of the average annual requirement to your priority asset categories. In this case, we're also accounting for some of the benefits to existing development. What that is telling us is that if we were to implement this in total, we would need about a 16% tax increase to support that. If we were to phase that increase over 5 years, it would be about a 3.1% increase. If instead we were to look at a 10-year phase-in period, it would be lower. The annual increase required at 1.6%. 5 years would be 1.1%, and 20 years would be just a little bit less than 1%. So that same analysis was applied to the second scenario. Again, that second scenario is a 2% annual increase. And so we can see that overall, it's a bit more of an increase than compared to scenario 1. If we were to look at different phase-in periods, we're looking at a 3.4% increase over 5, a 1.8% increase over 10, a 1.5 over 15, and a 1.3 over 20. The third scenario is looking at a 70% average annual requirement for every single asset category. So compared to the three, this would require the highest tax increase. If we were to do it just a one-time increase, it would be about a 23% increase. If we were to do this in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, the annual amounts would be reduced, and those would be 4.3 for 5, 2.2 for 10, 1.5 for 15, and 1.1 for 20. So there's a lot of numbers on the screen. Really, the key things to note is that basically scenario one is comparatively the most affordable option. Scenario two is the second most affordable option. And scenario three is the third. We did the same thing for your rate funded assets. Those assets, as they're rate funded, have different sources, I should say, for the investment amounts. So that's why they're separated out. This is looking at your water. And so if we were to fund 70% of the priority assets, it is about a 9.3% increase. Now, water was not identified as a priority asset. Sorry, folks. So that increase is due to benefits to existing. If we were to do a 2% increase, that's increases slightly. And then if we were to fund 70%, that is going to be the most significant increase. Now, recall back to some of the earlier slides, there is some risk in terms of the declines in condition for water and wastewater under scenarios 1 and 2, a little bit less so under scenario 3. Again, the key thing to recall from this slide, I know there's a lot of numbers to look at, is that scenario 3 would be the least affordable. And then scenario 2 would be kind of the second, and scenario 1 would be the most affordable option. Looking at the wastewater network, again, we have the same thing. So sorry, some of the triggers here are kind of going off. So I'm just going to leave it and hopefully you can see it okay. Okay, so for the wastewater network, if we look at 70% of the priority assets, that is about a 2.4% total increase. Again, wastewater was not identified as a priority, so that increase reflects benefits to existing development. Scenario 2 is a 2% annual increase. That would be a total amount of 2.7%. And scenario 3 is a 70%, and that would be a 15.2% total increase. Again, it could be phased in over different periods. That phase and approach would provide a more affordable option. The main thing, again, looking at this is the distinction between each of the scenarios. And the distinction is that scenario 3 has the highest total rate increase required. Scenario 2 would be the second highest, and scenario 3 would be, I guess, the lowest or the option as well. So that concludes the presentation. If there's any questions, we can, address those today. But thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time to hear this information. And yeah.
Thank you, Marisa, for your presentation. And indeed, there's a lot of numbers and a lot to think about there. Any questions from council? Or any comments from staff to Jim? Go ahead.
Good morning, good people. Just one thing to note with the water and wastewater systems. A lot of these were placed in roads at the same time. So the water being in the 60s, the sewer coming in the 70s. So those assets identified are all coming up at the same time. That really, in fact, when out in the boots on the ground, those pipes, for the most part, are in decent condition as far as wastewater. That we've surveyed over time and cambered. And the water, we are replacing and upgrading at different intervals with road reconstruction. So there is a tie-in, but that's where it really seems there's a disconnect a little bit about the asset itself, that they may be in fairly decent condition, but their time is up is what the clock is telling us.
Right. So again, any questions from council? Martin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. This is out to the finance. When it says like scenario 3 over a 5-year period, like the last chart, 2.9%. So that'll be 2.9% every year, right? Like, okay, so that's something that is a constant budget item then, and that would make budgeting a lot easier because that would translate to the taxpayer too, because that would be a consistent number for them as well, to know that this is what it's gonna be for 5 years. And they could budget for their taxes too, right? Does that make sense?
Yep. And then also Marisa did mention that the inflation isn't involved
Yeah.
in that either. So it wouldn't be 2.9 forever. There would be corrections to that, but yeah, essentially that's what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Barb?
Just a follow-up to Councillor Shipston's question. This investment in capital is separate from cost of living. This would be in addition to cost of living. So if cost of living is 3% and we commit to putting in 2% for the next 10 years, we're looking at 5% investment because cost of living just kind of helps maintain the status quo. It doesn't invest in the deteriorating of the asset.
Correct. Yeah. And then, I mean, there could be large jumps in commodity type items as well for building some of these items back, like some of the roads and buildings or whatever materials are required. So there is judgment and other professionals need to be addressed as well. But this is kind of the baseline of what it would be.
Yep, go ahead.
And so through you to either Taylor or Marissa, hi, good morning. This does not factor in any funding that we might get from the province. And we have realized or experienced a decline in consistent, sustainable infrastructure funding from the province, which just results in it being borne more and more by the property taxpayer.
Correct. So Marisa's presentation did include CCBF and OSIF.
Yeah.
So those would be the only ones that are considered in here. Anything else would be a benefit. And we could consider that on an annual basis. If we come up applicable for a grant, then we could adjust going forward, but that would be the baseline anyway.
And we were very fortunate this year, but we can't always count on that because we're competing with other very deserving municipalities that also have asset management issues.
Correct.
There's no other municipality than ours that is deserving.
Very true.
Just saying, just saying. Monica, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, PSD Citywide, for your presentation. Just through you, Chair, a quick question with regards to in terms of the reliability for our drinking water, which maybe you can answer or someone on staff can answer, which option would most reliably protect our drinking water system from decline and failure?
Who wants to have a go at that? Jim? Please.
Well, I think, as I stated, you know, for the most parts, our pipes are in decent condition. We are replacing them as we do road reconstruction and upgrading, upsizing in different areas for more service level, as expansion of the town keeps happening. But I don't think there's a real factor to safeguard. You know, some things crop up. As for instance, well 4 here recently, we've had a bit of an issue that we're working through. But for the most part, I would say our assets are protected in drinking water. Again, moving forward soon with developing another new well site coming online eventually here and adding to the system. But again, the systems are relatively new other than well D3. But other than that, the other assets are still got quite a bit of life expectancy left. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's an attempt at it, I guess.
Just a follow-up, Chair, if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CAO for that. And I know that all this asset management review is really focusing on, avoiding infrastructure debt through neglect. And this is for future councils not to inherit, any major infrastructure challenges. So with that in mind, do we have an understanding of these three options where it will protect the future considerations from inheriting major infrastructure failures rather than planned investment? That's because I'm kind of leaning to option 2, and I know we're going to be bringing the motion. That's what the item up very shortly. But I was just wondering if there was some insight on that part.
Taylor, do you wanna, or Marisa?
I don't know.
Sure, I
Marissa,
can
go
offer some
first. Yeah.
insights, and Jim, if
Sure,
you want
please.
to jump in. In terms of the water and wastewater, so this graph here is showing the condition of the water network over time and the projected condition by scenario. So that purple line is kind of the top line. That's scenario 3. So that's investing 70% of the need. So that scenario would give you the best projected outcomes and condition because it would give you the highest amount of funding soonest.
Does that help, Monica?
It's slide 15, clerk.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For now, that's good. Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Any other questions? Martin?
Yeah, I don't know if this is kind of related or not, but we're seeing 70%, like in scenario 3, 70% for all the assets. How does this affect money to be put in reserves, or does it?
Taylor.
So the asset management plan kind of takes into considerations both the money we are going to spend in a current year and then the money we should put into reserves. So any money over and above that we're kind of outside of our regular capital range would be going into reserves to fund the future years for these items.
Hence the average of 8.6
Right.
in this, yeah. Any other questions? Monica?
Thank you, Chair. That's a great question that Councillor Shipston brought up there. Just to that point as well, I guess this would be through you, Chair, to staff. If we go with one of the options that will have, we would say like a tax sticker shock, will staff be able to provide a phased implementation plan to reduce that shock?
Yep. So as Marisa did present on all options, there is 5, 10, 15, 20-year options we could select from should we wish to ease the burden on the resident. So that would be how we could do it. We also have the option to pick an option for tax funded assets and then a separate option for rate funded assets. So you don't just have to pick one and it covers everything. You can pick whatever one is the better option that you see.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess I had a thought, perhaps Corey or Jim can speak to it. Through the legislation, the Clean Water, I think it's Clean Water Act, don't quote me, I'm not sure entirely, but through one of those legislation pieces, council is personally accountable for water. It concerns me a little bit when we see here, we're talking about a certain funding level to reduce the risk. If we don't take the rate that reduces the risk almost to zero, we're admitting that there is risk. And if people get sick, you know where it's going to land. Any thoughts on that concern, I would say. Jim?
Well, yes, I can agree with how you're looking at this. Yes, it's Clean Water Act and the standard of care that council has to abide by that. I guess this is a good time to look at this because it ties in. We're almost finished our water and wastewater rate study. And if we are going to pick a funding model that's, say, scenario 3, that's expedites this, then now's the time that we incorporate it in that study too. I know there's been inquiries about comparison about our water and wastewater rates. That is coming very shortly with that study. But again, we would go back to Watson's with this information and say, here's the directive. And to negate that risk association. So I can agree with your concept. This was part of the reason that staff never provided a recommendation. We thought that council had to hash this around and understand a little bit about what was going on, the effects. As well, you know, the surveys indicated where, you know, the constituents want to be somewhere into a 2 to 8 or preferably a 2 to 3% increase. So I think this is all great timing for this document that we will be moving forward in direction one way or the other. But it all fits in with the other pieces that we need to deal with right now.
Right. I recall also, this is going back quite a few years, I think. Council at one point, Jim, you may remember, or Corey may remember this as well. Council was faced with a similar decision, whether to ramp up quickly the water rates to cover future asset management. Basically, it wasn't called that at the time. Or do we phase it in over time? Council chose to just go almost straight up to make sure those rates would account for future needs. I guess I'm a little puzzled why all of a sudden now we've fallen behind. It would seem so badly when I thought, perhaps incorrectly, that our rates would cover our future needs. Has something fallen off the cliff somewhere along the line that all of a sudden now we find ourselves sort of behind again? Jim?
I think it goes back to, you know, what dates these were put in service and how that is looked at in asset management and at their time of life when that when it's ended. And maybe that's not the truth out there with what's in the ground actually. So that's where there's a bit of a disconnect, I feel, with how the tabletop
Right.
looks with the actual facts out there. So I don't think our systems that are at a critical failure risk at this point in time.
Right.
Yes, identify that these assets, this is typically how long they last, but they can and do last longer. So, and noting that when we have seen inside our pipes, for the most part, they do not have a whole lot of buildup. They're fairly clean. So that risk is mitigated as well. I think we've taken a large steps lately in areas where we did have water main breaks and improvements in the water system. That being Main Street East, Victoria Street. That's a big bonus there. Like we've done a lot of work. So let's not put that in the rear view that we haven't been doing a good job, because I think it's actually the other way, that we've been doing a good job with what we've had to work with.
Right. Right. And I apologize if my perception was that staff weren't doing a good job. It was not my intention at all. I know staff are doing a great job. I guess I just struggle a little bit. This is very much a theoretical exercise, and you're telling me that boots on the ground are telling us this over here, whereas this is the theory. And that's where I think I'm struggling to reconcile the two. So Monica, see your hand up, go ahead, and then I'll go to Joan.
Thank you, Chair. So again, that's another point that I was thinking on as well. So with that in mind, would it be fair to say through you, Chair, that option 3 then may clearly be the strongest scenario that would result in the lowest long-term risk and better system condition, and also possibly reduce the likelihood of failure that directly could threaten public health. And again, this theoretical, the scenario, this is something we're trying to do our best to project. So with that in mind, through you, Chair, would Marissa or someone be able to advise if option 3 would align best with the objective of protecting our water system for the long term?
Marisa, you want to take a run at that?
Sure. So yes, for your water and your wastewater, option 3 will fund them at the highest level in the most immediate term. Basically, what that means, it would give the township funds to do what they need to do when they need to do it, and that in so doing would reduce the risk of a failure.
Thank
Joan, you have a question?
Sorry. Good morning again, everyone. I couldn't get my
Morning.
button unmuted. It's more of a question and a comment, as Mr. Chair just reminded us that and reiterated that council is responsible for providing safe drinking water. I think that we should be reasonably prudent and exercise the best care that is possible to make sure that we're ensuring the protection and the safety of the municipal user for the water system. So we should try to be in the middle and go with the best option, especially for the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And I
You're
guess I would just maybe caution, we're talking a lot here about risk to the water system. I have confidence that there is no real risk currently with the water system. The water is safe, full stop. We're just, we're talking about a theoretical exercise here about what might happen in the future. The water is safe today and will be into the future. There's no question about that. Taylor, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I did want to make a comment that per the legislation, a new asset management plan is required every 5 years. So should we choose a solution today, that doesn't mean we're stuck with it for the next 100 years. That means that we're going to do our best to implement it over the next 5 years, and then we can reevaluate from there. If we decide we want to go with the highest funded one today on water specifically, we can do that, and in 5 years reevaluate, did we make the right decision? Should we move money around? In that time, we'll have capital spending, and I know there are big projects coming up, so this could change a lot, and it is in flux, and this is all data as of today. So
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, Barb?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mayor Milne, for reiterating. I was actually going to chime in, is that our staff follow all of the regulations and do a remarkable job of ensuring the safety of our water. And that it currently isn't, because people listen to this after the fact and pick certain words out and may feel that the water is unsafe. But thank you for stating that very clearly. This is a matter of ensuring that there is no risk of failure long term, mitigating that in every possible theoretical scenario. Would it be through you to Marissa, would 2% for wastewater would be, because in scenario 3, it's 1.5% over 10 years. So if we were to commit to 1.5% for wastewater over 10 years, for water, it's 3%. And for our general assets, 2.2. That's scenario 3. If we were to find a comfort zone of 2% for the other assets long term, 3% for water, which gives us every possible assurance over the long term, and wastewater 2%. Would that be an investment that would give us the assurance that we're investing where it is needed, knowing that that is directly to capital and does not factor in cost of living? That is over and above. So if we're looking at a 3% operational cost of living increase, we're committing to putting in another 7%. Is that how I'm doing the math? Like, is that correct?
No,
Or
no.
so like, this is what I'm trying to get my head around. Are we investing in capital across the board? Let's say 3% across the board, whatever that number is. And that 3% goes to each of those categories plus cost of living?
So cost of living would be on the dollar. It wouldn't be a percentage on top, right? So if 3% is say 500,000 annually we're adding to water, it would be 2% plus the 500. So 525, 550,000. Or sorry, no, less than that. So it would just be a percentage of that addition. It wouldn't be the cost of living percentage as a whole plus whatever we've added already.
I know that, you know, the survey through you, so
Yeah.
the survey has indicated there's a tolerance for between 2 and 8. They'd like to keep it around 2 to 3, but are they thinking that that is the total tax increase, property tax increase per year? It's the property taxpayer or the user, in the case of water and wastewater, that has to bear the increase, not the people who are renting, other than it, you know, gets pushed back onto, you know, rent increases. So the comfort zone is 2 to 3%, maybe for how do we achieve scenario 3 or even scenario 2 over a 10-year period, knowing what the tolerance level is. You're going to say, good question.
It's a good question to propose, especially with our budget in the afternoon. I think that's more of a council decision. I can do, like, we can research grants, we can do whatever we can to create efficiencies. At the end of the day, there will be capital needs and there will also be operating needs that cannot be foregone in certain circumstances. I'm sure some could, but I think in Marissa's presentation as well, it was that the 2 to 8 may not include the needs of this survey. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Marissa, but not all of the needs were in that realm.
Marisa?
So that was the increase I think that you're thinking of was the amount that counselors indicated that they would be willing to support tax changes. And yes, it ranged. The most common range was 2 to 3. The overall range was 2 to 8. The increases that we've noted are the increases that would be required to support capital only. So they would not account for any inflationary adjustments.
Thank you.
Monica, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So again, to that point, that's something I was also mulling over as well with regards to if there would be a possibility through you, Chair, if it would be possible to apply, for example, option 3 specifically to water and wastewater while using option 2 for roads and other tax supported assets. Just kind of see if there might be almost a hybrid, so to speak, if that would be like a 4th option. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it.
No, I'm understanding that in fact is an option. We can do that. We can pick and choose, so to speak. A financial buffet, if you want to call it that. Maybe that's a poor analogy, but anyway, yes.
Food is always good. Food is good.
Yes, absolutely. So is a buffet. But anyway, just the other thing to note, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we're being asked to do is a target, is a aspiration This doesn't actually commit us to anything because we still have to go through the budget process. I see a lot of nodding heads, so
I'll
Is
just
it-
speak to the
Taylor?
legislation on that.
go ahead.
So we do have to have an asset
Yes,
management plan.
absolutely.
And annually, I'm supposed to bring a survey to council on how we are implementing that. So
Right.
there will be some,
Or not,
yeah, there could be reasons to not.
right?
um,
Exactly.
But we just have to keep in mind that going forward, there will be that item that I have to
Correct.
do.
Absolutely. Jason, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question or in there a comment. I like what you just said about keeping the water separate. Of course, we have great staff, good water. We have to have good water.
Yep.
But I think it's more about with the waste or the water funding study or whatever you call it coming up. Are we jumping into it a bit? Like, I know looking at the surveys for this afternoon's budget meeting, I don't know how to word this. This is a Dundalk, basically a Dundalk thing, and it's a big, I know water's funded through water, but I think we have to take a look at the rates. It's, you know, we hear it all the time. It's a big community. So if you're using the water, I think we have to look at, that taxation and can't be paying for all that. I don't know how to say it, is that, you know what I'm trying to say? It's a specific thing. The roads go through Dundalk, they go through the whole community, so we have to fund them evenly, I would say, but that is a pretty specific topic, so yeah, user pay is what I think, but.
Barb?
Through you, if I'm not mistaken, though, the water and wastewater, these increases would be applied to the existing benefiting users. This is not taxation.
Correct.
Thank you.
None of the water element of this or anything will ever touch the taxation base.
Right. Did that? is
Yeah,
that-
I didn't really.
No,
that
no,
make sense?
no capital
knew-
infrastructure, no usage, nothing related to water will ever be on a Holstein residence tax bill.
Okay.
Just to be
Guess I
just
knew
so
that,
it's clear
but-
to everybody.
Okay,
Yeah, no, it's good to clarify for sure. Any other questions, comments? Recommendations? Anybody wanna? Barb? Oh,
Can we have a mover and seconder first?
well,
Thank you.
right. So, sorry, Madam Clerk, just, you wanna receive the report first and then a separate
Sure.
motion, or do you want a motion?
No, if we just want to receive it for information, we can move to Taylor's staff report
Okay.
when we're ready, and Marissa's gonna stay on.
I see, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Barb?
So I would happily move it to receive for information. One more question.
Just need a seconder first. Jim will second. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
We're good to go now.
Yep.
Thank you. And the asset management plan is a requirement. And we need to show that we are doing our due diligence in following that asset management plan, whichever we choose, whichever direction, whichever level we choose. But the grants and funding and provincial funding that we may be eligible for is based on having that asset management plan and showing that we are at least trying to follow it.
Yep, so I do have the legislation in front of me. So it says, with the planning progress, there's an annual review and it must address the municipality's progress in implementing its asset management plan. It doesn't speak to how it's funded. So we can say, although we didn't increase taxes this year, we have gotten X, Y, and Z grants that are going to cover the asset management plan funding for this year.
Yep, go ahead.
But will the asset management plan provide us with not having an asset management plan might make us ineligible for certain grants and funds because we didn't follow the legislation. Having an asset management plan is great. It makes us qualify for various grants and funds, but not following our asset management plan might make us ineligible for those grants and funds. It's kind of that holding the asset management plan over our head. Not that I want to suggest for a moment that we wouldn't follow a plan that we put in place, but we may not be here in 10 years.
Yep. No,
So we have to rely on future staff and future councils to follow that plan, or at least adjust it accordingly.
yeah, and I think that's why the legislation has you updated every 5 years to do like a grand scope of everything again, because a lot can change in 5 years. You could have thousands more homes or lots of different things. So I think that is the key element of it. I think you just have to show that the best efforts are being put forward. There are impediments to that, and I understand, and obviously the legislation speaks to that. So
Kayla, you want to jump in there?
Yes, thank you through you. In relation to the grant applications specifically, they do ask for the asset management plan. And I think the grants aren't specifically looking, are you following the asset management plan? It's, are those assets identified in the asset management plan that you're applying for funding for?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Martin, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering about that too, you know, if, let's say hypothetically, we do the 70%, and I was along the same line as Barb there. If there is, and maybe Kayla can answer this too, if there is a grant application and they see that we're putting all that percentage into the plan, would that also negate? Because they're saying, look, these guys are doing all this, they don't need that money because they're, you know,
no, it's a good.
you know, because, oh, they're 70%, they're actually putting that in.
Hmm.
So, you know, let's have a look at this grant. Do they really need it? Would it be a negative as well? Just
I
hypothetically.
I can't imagine so. I have to imagine if you're putting your best foot forward that would be appreciated. Because the government has put this piece of legislation in place. They want everybody to follow it. They don't want us to have to rely on them should worst case scenario happen. So I think that it might be looked better. I can't speak to that, but.
Okay, I think as the clerk said, we've kind of beat this. We're a little bit ahead of ourselves, and I apologize for that. I let that happen. We're gonna get into more of this when we get to Taylor's report in shortly. So the motion is to receive Maurice's report. Oh, I've already got a mover and seconder. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Marisa, but we'll just don't go too far away. We might need you. Well, I'm sure we will need you some more in just a few minutes here. Moving on, we have the adoption of the minutes from November 19th, council and closed session meeting. Someone care to move those? Jim, seconded by Monica. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. It's 5:10. Does anybody need a break? Yep. All right, we'll recess for 5 minutes and we will come back after that at let's say 10:15. going here shortly. All right, we'll bring the meeting back to order. We will go into reports from municipal officers. Start with the finance department, and Taylor, take it away, please.
Okay, so my report is essentially just kind of summarizing the options provided by Marisa and Citywide. So essentially, the goal of today is to pick one of the three options, and it can be, again, taxation can be one option, and water, wastewater can be a separate option. So those are viable options for today. If we don't make a decision today, we will be pushing out when we can finish the asset management plan and lengthens our contract with Citywide. So ideally, that is not the result of today. I think it's great that we are in line with the budget, so we can talk about this in the afternoon, and it can be in everybody's heads going into the afternoon about things we might consider. So again, just to reiterate, option one is maintain current investment for everything except roads, bridges, and land improvements. Those three items would be funded at 70% of their condition. Option two would be current investment in all asset categories with a 2% annual increase. And option three is model investment of 70% across all needs of categories. Again, we can do a 5-year implementation plan up to 20-year implementation plan should council wish. So those are all of the options set forward today. And again, this is through legislation in Ontario, and we will need these going forward for grant applications and likely loan applications through Ontario. So I didn't provide a recommendation in the report. I did like where council was going with their thoughts and the communication that was happening at the table. If you want my financial opinion, I would go option three for water, wastewater at the 5-year implementation, just to make sure we have as little risk as possible. And I would go with option two for 5 years as well, to ensure that we do have accurate or supplemental funding in for everything there. And again, in 5 years, we can reevaluate should that not be meeting the needs based on the risk not coming down at all. I know the risk is kind of more longer term with option two, but I think that's probably the best option for the resident as well.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. And again, picking a scenario doesn't commit us to it because we still have to go through the budget process, but it does give us a target to work towards. Okay.
And
So-
the scenario would be how the asset management plan is functioned.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think we need to make a decision today where we want to go so that we can finish off the asset management plan and be compliant with the legislation. Monica, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you through you, Chair, to Taylor, for, just reminding of the flexibility, and also to you, Chair, to continuously just reminding us that this isn't like a locked in thing, something that we will be working as things happen. So with that being said, with our last discussion during the delegation, and right now, as the treasurer just mentioned about option 2 and 3, would there be a possibility to have a model that the staff could provide what the annual water rate impact would be under a hybrid approach compared to a full option 3 scenario? And if we do need a fourth option, would that, in terms of procedure, require, what would that require? Like, would it be a motion, or would it would it be like, that's my kind of 1A and part B question.
So through
Taylor?
you, another option would be outside of the scope of what we have hired Citywide to provide to us. So then we would need to recontract with them, and that would push our finish line on the asset management plan. So I would not recommend doing that. Marissa did provide what the rate increases would look like for water. So we'd have, I forget what it is exactly, but I think around the 5% in option 3 for the 5-year implementation. So we are in the middle of the rate study with Watson's, and we did kind of provide them a little bit of a heads up on the information we were receiving through this asset management plan, so they have an idea of what's going on. So I can't give you an exact model today, but she has provided the percentages that it would go up. So
And any increase proposed would come before council, right? So, I saw Martin's hand first and then I'll come to Barb.
Thank you. Yeah, Taylor, I kind of agree with what you've said about option 2 and option 3. Option 1, that's been the status quo, and that's one of the reasons why Ontario infrastructure deficits in almost 40 billion now. That's where we are. So that is not an option. For me personally, hypothetically, I would like to see option 3 for both everything and wastewater, because reactively, we don't want to go there either. This is being proactive. So I agree with option 3 for the water. And as I said, I do it all over them, but keeping in mind that we're all at the table, property tax and payers, then in all assets plus the 2% would be fair, and do it for 5 years and see where we are. So that's all I have to say about this, hypothetically.
Hypothetically. Okay. Barb?
Thank you. Through you, I'm not sure that it's 2%. I'm a little confused when I go back to the scenario analysis of PSD's presentation. It says scenario 2, 2% annual, this is for the tax funded assets, 2% annual increase in brackets, but then 5 years would be 3.4 annual, 10 years would be 1.8 annual. Where does the 2% annual increase come in?
So the 2% is not speaking specifically to the taxation rate, it's speaking to the funding of capital budgets. So our capital projects might be $5 million. So this is saying a 2%, sorry. Do you want me to repeat everything I've just?
No.
Okay. So the 2% is speaking to increasing the capital spending, not the taxation rate.
Okay,
This is only looking at capital.
right. But you're asking us to choose a scenario, and you just suggested general assets at scenario 2. I value your opinion at 5 years, which according to the scenario analysis, it would be 3.4% for general tax increase at the 5-year mark, 3.4% annually for the next 5 years for scenario 2.
If I may, Taylor,
Absolutely,
I think I
Marissa.
can clarify that.
Go ahead.
So one of the factors that we also looked at is the benefits to existing development. So those are costs that are projected due to development that cannot be funded by development charges. And those costs are factored into the financial analysis that we do. And that is why it's more than that 2%. So basically what we look at is what is the increase in funding that's required to reach the service level? And then what are the benefits to existing growth that are expected over this period? And the total of those is then what we use to determine what the tax increase required is.
Go ahead.
So if I look at the chart that's on the screen for tax funded assets only.
Yeah.
It clearly for us, because I'm a visual person. It says 5 years.
Yeah.
Tax increase required, 3.4%.
Yep.
At scenario 2, and 4.3% for 5 years if we go with scenario 3.
Yep.
Same holds true for water and for wastewater. If we go with scenario 3, For water, it's 5.9%. And that hits the user.
Yep.
Or 2.9% if we impose 2.9 every year for 10 years, we can still achieve, hopefully, the asset management that we're aiming for. Scenario 3 for wastewater was 2.9 every year for 5 years, or 1.5. The 2% or the 70% AAR, the 2% annual increase in brackets doesn't, what you're recommending is in the chart that says 5, 10, 15, 20, and the annual tax increase required. I just want to make sure I'm on the right page.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so
It's just that the further you push that out, the more risk could ensue.
no, I understand.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that when we're thinking about the budget impact
Mhm.
and the impact on the property taxpayer and the user of the water and wastewater, because they're two separate things. What you're suggesting, and I'm just, because we don't have a chart that we can put up on the screen for all three, you're suggesting that general assets would be scenario 2 for 5 years, and that would be 3.4% directly to capital every year for 5 years, pending, budget approval. We might be able to be a little bit more flexible based on growth, all of those other things. And then we have the water chart. Scenario 3 would be 5.9%, and the wastewater chart at scenario 3 would be 2.9%. I just want to make sure that I am understanding those are your recommendations, and I do appreciate them because it helps us, it gives us a starting point.
Yeah, and just remember, like, I'm looking at it on a financial basis. Then you should take Jim's consideration as well, Corey, John. If I'm looking dollars to dollars, I'm looking risk level. I'm gonna go with what's gonna mitigate the most risk. And I think that is it.
Okay. Any other questions? Monica?
Thank you, Chair. So just through you, Chair, and just for clarity, would it be possible, or am I understanding that it would be possible that we could possibly fund water at option 3 levels and everything else under option 2?
That is absolutely an option, yes.
And if so,
If you'd
would,
like to, if you'd like to make that a motion, go ahead.
sure, I would like to make that a motion, and the reason for that, but before I do, I wanted to
Go ahead.
just get the treasurer and CAO, what do you think for that? Because where I'm coming from with option, I guess 4, is that because water and wastewater are public health assets and failure of these affect residents immediately, I'm trying to find a balanced approach that protects water without putting undue pressure elsewhere, and just trying to find the best way to collaborate in that regard. So I'm hearing treasurer saying 2 and 3. So is that, am I mistaken to understand that we have to pick 1, 2, or 3, or we can actually have 2 and 3 itself? Or do we need a hybrid? And if so, do we need an amendment? So that's just pretty much where I'm coming from. If I can have some clarity first before I decide on a motion.
Yep, so through you,
Taylor?
you can choose for taxation, you can choose option 1, 2, or 3. For water and wastewater, you can choose 1, 2, or 3. There is no hybrid model in this report. There's no option 4 in this report. Should council wish to go with that method, we would have to extend the contract with PSD, and it would be at council's expense.
So I
Thank
think
you.
what I heard you say, Monica, and what I hear you saying is that you would like to increase the commitment to financials for tax funded assets, which is everything except water and wastewater, at a 2% annual increase. And water and wastewater would be increased at the scenario 3, or the 5.9 and the 2.9 for 5 years each. That is,
And-
if you want to call that hybrid, that's a hybrid, but that is what we could do for sure.
And through you, Chair, thank you for that. I also don't want to, because I know we're time sensitive and looking for cost effective. So if this is something that it's a little bit tough if I am leaning more towards option 3, obviously. First it was 2 and now 3, just hearing the discussions. But if it's going to extend things and be very costly, then obviously I wouldn't want to put that undue pressure and also any complexity for staff to have to rejig everything. So I'll just think about it for a moment. But if there's any further insight to that, I appreciate it.
Barb, you have another question? Go ahead.
Well,
Or point? Go ahead.
I'm not sure where the 2% came in for tax funded assets only, because the recommendation is scenario 2 for 5 years is 3.4%. It is clearly stated here that we can choose any of those scenarios for any of those 3 categories. We can choose scenario 2 for tax funded assets, which is property taxation. We can choose scenario 1, 2, or 3 for water over a 5 or 10 or 15-year period. What you're suggesting, Taylor, and what you have made very clear is that the longer we stretch it, the more the chance of risk to an asset, whether that's tax funded water or wastewater, we're just delaying the investment. So if we were to, the only hybrid option is that we choose a different percentage somewhere in between 5 and 10. So if we were to suggest what Brian has mentioned, 2%, if we went with scenario 2 at 2%, it's better than the 10-year, but it's not as much as the 5. I'm just trying to get a handle on what hybrid model we're even considering, because it's either right now, and I am not in favor of extending our contract because we are already late in our submission, as we were with 80% of the other municipalities. Were also non-compliant as of July 1st. So we were in good company. Is there a possibility that we can choose a percentage somewhere in between the 5-year mark and the 10-year mark and have that stretched over, 8 years?
I think I'd have to defer to Marissa on that specifically, but I think you can still choose any option you want and implement it at your desire. We just have to say to the government, this is why we are doing this. So I don't know if Marissa is going to say you can't based on the model. I'd have to defer to her on that, but I don't think there's an issue with implementing.
Marisa?
Yeah, we would have to make some adjustments to our analysis to reflect a different time period. It sounds like what you're trying to determine is what is the time period to have, an increase somewhere between the 5 and 10-year option. So we'd have to go back and kind of sort through the numbers to see what length of time that would be. But I think it would be fair to say that it would be, somewhere between 5 and 10 if you're looking for a 2%.
Okay. Barb? Oh, Monica, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just with the previous comment, I just want to reiterate that these are like complex technical decisions and we're relying on staff expertise to guide us. So the reason I'm asking these questions is to simply have a full understanding, not just for myself, but the benefit of everybody, to understand the implications before council makes long-term decisions. So I think that it's okay for anyone to ask questions in that regard. And again, we're not engineers and asset specialists, so it is important for us to ask these questions to gain the clarity, especially when decisions are going to affect infrastructure for decades. So that was just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Barb?
And I absolutely agree. This is why, because I'm confused as well. And the more numbers we throw out there, the more confused I get. So in fairness, we can all ask the questions we need. I think that today we need to give staff direction on what scenario we want to choose. And we will have further discussion when it comes to our budget deliberations or the forecasting deliberations. And pending between this motion, our forecasting deliberations and the time we submit it, it may be that we choose the 10-year scenario, but for purposes of today and this report, I would propose your recommendation, Taylor, that we follow for tax funded assets only, the scenario 2 at the 5-year mark, which is 3.4%. Get it on the floor and then we can see where it goes. And for water, scenario 3 at 5.9%, which is the 5-year mark, and wastewater at scenario 3, 2.9%, which achieves Councillor Singh Soar's desire to follow scenario 3 for water and wastewater to be the most proactive in mitigating any possible risk. And I would so move that scenario, put it out on there on the floor. If it passes, great. If not, there'll be someone else will have a suggestion.
Madam Clerk, you had a,
Can we, I just need a mover and seconder before we,
Yep.
for the actual motion as it stands, before we start putting amendments out there.
can we not,
Please,
can we
no.
not make a motion that we're going to receive the report and this is
If we want to do it that way, that's fine.
that okay? Because I
I-
think that was the intent, Barb.
Yes, that's the intent, but it's
Rather than moving an amendment,
whichever the clerk prefers.
It-
Right, whichever the clerk prefers.
it doesn't matter to me, however you want to do it.
And I
I
would
have an
still move-
amendment written, but it's fine.
Just before, I want to get this procedural piece in place first.
I think we may as well follow what we normally do, have a mover seconder to receive it as it is, and then we'll move an amendment.
Okay, so you'll move that we receive? You'll second? Okay, Taylor.
So my last comment would be, just because I think the 5-year plan is the best, obviously you don't have to follow that. But if you so choose to do a 10-year plan, you can be better than what the plan is.
That's what I.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm sure the government would love to see that happen, right? So if it's more appetizing to council to do the 10-year plan, then do that. And we can talk in the afternoon about how can we improve it, but maybe not hit the 3.4 if that's going to be
Yep.
too much of an increase for residents.
Okay. So
I don't want to confuse it more, but
No, no.
I think that's kind of where some of this
Yep,
discussion is
that's
coming
fair.
from.
Monica, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence as I asked this, but could Deputy Mayor kindly just say it one more time? What she was proposing?
Well, currently she's proposed to receive the report as presented. But if she'd like to describe how she might amend that motion,
Thank
she
you.
can do that.
Yes, so thank you. And I'm sure that the clerk is going to repeat it because
Oh, okay.
now Taylor has suggested that we go with maybe consider the 10-year and then do better.
Either way.
But I'm going to let the clerk
I probably,
recite the and Joan has a question, but the clerk will read what I had proposed and then we can go from there.
Okay,
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
so I have it that, and it could be too broad, but I have it that council directs staff and PSD citywide to proceed with option 2, with the option 2 funding model for tax funded assets and the option 3 funding model for water and wastewater assets as outlined in the staff report.
Okay. Is
Thank
that your
you.
motion, Barb? To amend?
Am
Yeah,
I asking a question?
yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy to move that, but do we need to be specific as to which 5, 10, 15 model that is proposed in this case?
Defer
Could
to
it be
Taylor on that.
generic? Could it be generic and then we hone it in?
Marisa, do you have a preference on that for your report?
We will need to have a time period determined to base the report on. in the absence of a time period, we wouldn't be able to effectively determine the funding gap. So we would need that.
Okay,
Could we add at the 5-year level?
That's for both.
Yes.
okay. So that motion has been proposed for an amendment. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
I was
Jason?
like, okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Joan, go ahead.
Thank you. I would prefer to kind of go with Taylor's 10-year plan on that particular one that you just said, because that would mitigate the costs for most of the residents instead of, because the 5-year, I think it's 5.9 something. Taylor, can you remind me of what you said about the 10 years?
Sorry, the 10 years, I was more talking about taxation since that
Yeah.
would be, but sorry, if we're looking at water on the screen right now, is the 5.9 at 5 years. Tax funded is 1.8 for 10 years
Thank you.
and 3.4 for 5.
And again, we can adjust those time periods when we get to the budget deliberations if we
Okay.
need to, either do better or less. So the motion to amend it is there. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Now we're back to the original motion as amended. Any further discussion or questions? Jason?
I think I've got it understood, but we've committed to this number here now, but we haven't, because we haven't done it through the budget yet.
Right.
We've committed to a 5.9% water increase.
Yep.
But we're paying a company now to do a study that's gonna come and tell us what it just seems I'm lost. Like, we've already committed to this 5.9% in this. We haven't committed to it in the budget. We're paying another consultant to. Well, no, but for the wastewater study, but we've already decided we're gonna put it up 6%. So I don't know who can answer that,
The
but
5.9 is a target that we've decided. Once we get the study or the survey, the rate study, then we can see where we are relative to
I get it.
the rest of the world. All right, well, Taylor, did you want to add something in there?
Yeah, you don't have to spend it just because you approve it, right?
I get-
So, yeah, I just want to be as clear as possible. I know this is a big topic of conversation. And should Watson's come back and say, like, disagree with asset management plan, when I provided them the information, they didn't disagree with it. They really appreciated all the data that Marisa had provided to them, and it gave them kind of a broader scope. I know that they are going to work with Triton to see if it's kind of in line. So we have as much information out there as possible to try and get the best number for our users.
Martin?
Yeah, just a comment if I may. And this number, you did mention, Taylor, that whatever percentage is not used, it will still go into reserves, which will be proactive for years to come as well. So it's
Absolutely.
all good in the long run, which is what we're talking about.
Yep, exactly.
So we've had a lot of discussion about different things, but we haven't heard from John regarding roads, bridges, that kind of thing. He's staying pretty quiet over there. Did you want to add anything there, John? On where we're currently headed towards here?
No, not really. I think just keep funding, increasing it a little bit every year is gonna keep us going. Yep.
That's a fairly safe answer.
Yep. Prepared answer.
Monica?
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarity, the reason why we are making this decision now is that when we do come to the special meeting at 1 p.m., we will have a number that we can work with to see how it will work in the budget. So that's why we are doing this now. Is that right for me to see it that way?
We are doing this now to be in line with legislation and follow legislation. It just kind
Yeah.
of so happens that best case scenario, we have the budget coming up in the afternoon. So we'll all have it fresh in our minds and we all know decisions that were made here.
Yeah.
This is an attempt to try to address the infrastructure gap that everybody keeps talking about, and it's not just us, it's right across the province. So this is an attempt to try to catch up eventually.
Yeah, it's just to the point to Councillor Rice, because I know that he's wondering we're finalizing now and then going to budget, but I think, I guess it works out very good that if we have the decision now, which is in line with legislation and everything, the fact that we have the budget time coming up, we'll be able to even see how that will work better. So it just.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Barb?
And to Jason's question, I'm sorry, I thought you were referring to this report. We entered into the DC study and the water rate study some time ago. This information is actually going to benefit Watson in delivering their report. It may come back that the rate, they can jiggle the rates a little bit better, but I see your point. The consultants, but it's a requirement for us to do the water rate analysis. Again, another legislated expense.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Marisa, very much for your attendance this morning. We truly appreciate your help in guiding us through that.
Thank you very much to the entire township as well for having us and working with us on this project. And we look forward to completing the last few steps.
And so do I. So do we. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you, Taylor, and
Take care.
anyone else that was part of that. Corey, Jim, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to planning department, which is generally a favorite. The first is the zoning bylaw amendment for Amon Bauman. Someone care to move that, please? Jim, second by Jason. Victoria, is this your report? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. And I find on-farm diversified uses very exciting. So,
Wow.
okay. So just to jump in, council previously saw this at public planning back in January. Went away for a bit just based on some public feedback. Just as a refresher on farm diversified use, they're proposing about 750 square meters of floor area. It includes an office, power room, and up to 500 square meters of outside storage as well. Site plans on attachment 1 and staff's report as well. As I mentioned, I went to public planning back in January. There was several people that opposed the on-farm diversified use. They expressed some concerns regarding traffic, some noise, odor, land use compatibility, road condition, and some similar concerns as well. So the applicant provided a D6 guideline compliance report and followed up recently with a noise feasibility study stating that the OFD will be a truss manufacturing assembly and indicating the separation from nearby residences complied with provincial guidelines. So that's the D6 guidelines and NECP guidelines as well. So the rezoned area will cover about 4,760 square meters. It'll be located about 69 meters from the wetland boundary. The workshop itself is also proposed about 107 meters from the front lot line and over 130 meters from the residence directly to the west. Just to give some context, the lands are farmed with about 404 meters frontage along Southgate Road 26, 583 meters depth, and just over 23.8 hectares in lot area. There's also some flat rolling topography. They have heavily treed wetland as well, covering most of the lands. Again, that's in attachment 2 to the north and east of the existing home. There are some nearby agricultural uses, also some existing OFDUs with heavily wooded naturalized areas as well extending around the site. And there's farms located in all directions. There's a cluster of smaller rural residential lots over about 4 kilometers southeast of the lands as well. Just to go over some MDS, or provincial minimum distance separation, they provided formulae and guidelines to implement separations between the livestock barns and separate sensitive uses. The nearest residence, the proposed barn, is located about 100 meters away. They included MDS 2 calculations for the horse barn and demonstrated a sufficient setback. An MDS 1 calculation was also provided for a beef barn to the south of the proposed OFU. So to go over some D6 guidelines. So as we kind of know for these on-farm diversified uses, it's either 20 meters, 70 meters, or 300 meters, debating or depending on the class use and the industry. As I kind of raised before, there were some concerns from the public in January regarding the potential noise impacts and setbacks to residential uses. So the applicant initially, their consultant submitted a D6 guideline compliance assessment. We had a discussion with township staff and the consultant, and they decided to move forward with a professional engineer who specializes in noise, acoustics, and vibration. So then they submitted a noise feasibility study as well. And both studies conclude that the 130 meters between the OFDU and the nearest residence is compliant. Township engineering consultant Triton also reviewed the noise feasibility study and found that it was compliant as well and had no concerns. So just to go over some comments received, that's on page 4 of staff's report. Enbridge Gas in Grey County had no concerns. Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, they actually conducted a site visit following the public planning meeting. That was back in near end of February. Provided some updated mapping for the recommended EP zone, the environmental protection zone. They want to reduce that further based on their site visit, and advised that the proposal doesn't require any further review or a permit. And that revised map, apologies, I thought it was in the report. It's actually on the township website if you'd like to review the EP zone mapping update provided from SVCA. Historic Saugeen Métis had no concerns, provided that the setback from the wetland is maintained and no tree removal is required. And again, as I stated, Triton Engineering reviewed the provided noise study and had no comments or concerns. And note that the findings of the study indicated that potential noise from the facility is expected to meet the applicable Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks criteria at the nearest noise sensitive receptors. And some public comments were received and include some resident questions regarding the contents of the site plan, the nature of the OFDU being proposed, some concerns regarding the impacts to property value, concerns regarding the nature of the proposed operation, and impacts to neighboring properties. Some further public comments were received following the writing staff's report. To summarize, it includes concerns regarding smell and noise impacts, setbacks from the wetland boundary, and the impacts of on-farm diversified uses on neighboring rural properties. And yeah, to briefly go over, to summarize that, back in January, there was concerns raised by the public regarding environmental and safety concerns, traffic and road conditions, noise, smell, dust impacts, transparency regarding the application, future expansion and land use, and compliance and agency consultation. So the applicant submitted the D6 guideline compliance report and a noise feasibility study in response to these concerns. And these reports were published on the township's website, and residents were notified of the studies as well. So the proposed 4,760 square meter rezoned area for the OFDU, staff feels it complies with the township and county official plan policy. It allows up to 2% of the lot size, and the 750 square meter gross floor area of the OFDU is within the maximum 750 square meter limit in the township official plan. The OFDU will also remain secondary to the principal agricultural use and is supported by provincial policy and guidelines for use of prime agricultural lands. As well, the farm cluster will be enhanced with a barn that complies with MDS as well. So the small scale dry industrial works, it's a truss assembly, should have minimal impact on nearby residences. There's 2 lines of trees west of the OFDU that will assist in screening the proposed use as well. Buffering and screening is required in the zoning amendment and further enforced through site plan agreement or site plan control process. No technical information has come forward to dispute the conclusions in the D6 guideline compliance report and the noise feasibility study as well submitted. So the rezoning bylaw limits the floor area of the proposed OFDU, and associated buildings and regulations in the amending bylaw will ensure the zoned area and all proposed buildings are located outside the EP and the wetland zone as recommended by SVCA. Happy to answer any questions or concerns at this time.
Thank you, Victoria. Questions from council, comments? Martin?
I've got no problem with this, Victoria, and this question might not be specifically for you, and even if it's pertinent. I'm looking at attachment 1, the side, the site plan. It already has an existing entrance, which is straight through. And admittedly on the photograph, it's not that big. So John, why is there proposed commercial entrance with a gigantic curb? Can't you use the original driveway?
John?
Through the chair. We're just protecting our infrastructure by making it wider. Like if there's big tractor trailers pulling in there, they would have difficulty if the laneway's too narrow and potential for them to
Yeah.
drive off and do damage to the roadside or to the culvert in the laneway as well. So
Yeah.
to
No, I'm
mitigate
just
those.
thinking on their part for saving money to use the existing laneway and extend that out to
Oh, yeah.
commercial size, because
Yeah.
it shows on the site plan a curve, and if you're getting a 54 trailer.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, there's all that talk about trucks and
No, and-
safety issues, so
yeah.
I just wondered about that, that's.
Yeah,
all.
no, they would be able to expand the current entrance to commercial.
Okay, that's what it shows on the
Yeah.
site plan, so that's good. No problems planning wise though.
Okay.
Thanks for
you.
that, John.
Any other questions? Monica, or Joan rather, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Victoria, the two public comments that we have here, can you clarify anything about their concerns? And did you get back to any of them as to the nature of their concerns and what is fact and what is fiction? But could you just give me some clarification as to their opposition and their concerns?
Victoria?
Sure. So through you, I kind of touched on it a bit earlier. So initially, before public planning, there were some concerns that were raised by the public. So staff reached out and provided clarification. And then the applicant went away just to work on the noise impact and address that. And then before council meeting today, there was two residential letters that were received. It was just outlining their concerns and stating that they were in opposition of the application, and staff feel that so far with the D6 compliance letter that was submitted in the feasibility study, that these concerns that were raised mainly towards noise, smell and vibration impacts or whatnot can be addressed through the noise feasibility study. So we did let them know that the studies were available online, and I believe a few people reached out just to kind of listen in today to see how this file was going to proceed. But everything's accessible online as well. And any follow-ups that were required, staff made sure to follow up with their concerns and address any of the issues by what was provided by the applicant as well.
Thank you, Victoria. Does that help, Joan?
Thank you, Victoria. Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Barb?
Thank you. And just to confirm that if there was a haul route recommended by the roads department, that would be at the site plan stage?
Through you, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
And would, because of comments made at the public meeting, including Mayor Milne about the spring conditions of 26, is there a haul route that you would recommend? John?
John?
Through the chair, yes, if it came down to putting forward a haul route, I would recommend heading east on Southgate 26 to Side Road 61, south on 61 to Southgate Road 24, and then onto the pavement from there. And again, in the spring, when the road conditions are soft, it is half load season then as well, so the loads should be restricted coming in and out.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you, Victoria. Moving on to the next report regarding comments back to the ministry regarding Bill 68. Someone care to move that we receive that? Martin, seconded by Monica. Ken, is this yours? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, your worship, and good morning, council. Just before I begin, this item is sort of tangentially connected to an item that you have on the consent agenda, which is 1110, which is comments from the Conservation Authority regarding the same ERO. So we've included that in the agenda. Just thought I'd flag that for you. Once again, I will just say that provincial changes in legislation are not my favorite, as opposed to Victoria having OFDU being a favorite. But we have before you comments related to Bill 68, which in summary is the province wishing to consolidate 36 conservation authorities, all 36 of them, into 7 regional conservation authorities, and then the creation of an oversight agency called the Provincial Conservation Agency. Included in the legislation is the ability for the minister to create a regulation to help create the new provincial agency, and then also how it's funded and how it has oversight and who makes up the oversight board. We would continue as a municipality to have 2 conservation authorities. We have 2 now. What will happen is we would be allocated to the, assuming all things are approved as is, the Lake Erie Regional Conservation Authority, and then the Huron Superior Regional Conservation Authority, which I would note stretches as far as Thunder Bay. So certainly we have some concerns with where we've been assigned, essentially, how we would have a relationship with a regional conservation authority that stretches all the way to Thunder Bay is certainly challenging. How the agency will be funded is also another key concern. And I know there is concern being expressed by our existing conservation authorities about, with this consolidation, where does the existing funds that they have go? Because that is money from the township and the township taxpayers. We certainly have concerns about this regulation in terms of the ability of the new agency to, I will say, allocate their costs to the regional conservation authorities, which then means that they, assuming that no changes happen to the fact that their fees are frozen for the most part, where does that money come from? And my suspicion is that that will squarely land in the budget. Maybe not this year's, but it will probably come back as an increase to taxpayers through the Conservation Authority funding that we have to include. And the other key issue we have is the proposed accountability. There's reporting about decisions every 3 years, which to me doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're actively making decisions and potentially making decisions that could, in theory, override regional conservation authority decisions. Why report on those every 3 years? They really should be reported at the time. When council makes a decision, it's part of the public agenda. So the accountability system seems to be a bit, it doesn't align with typical public practice, I will just say, or at least in my opinion. So we provide you comments, yet again, happy to take some feedback from council to update those. We have lots of time to get those comments back. And I suspect we'll see further comments from other conservation authorities as we get closer to the timeline of the ERO closing, which is around Christmas time. Happy to take your feedback and questions.
Thank you, Ken. And I would ask our local representative if she would like to weigh in with any comments. Barb?
Or not.
I would love to. However, I think Ken has captured a lot of the concerns that are being expressed across the 36 conservation authorities. To be lumped in with 78 or 80 other municipalities in just the Huron Superior watershed and the Lake Erie watershed for the little piece of Dundalk. The fact that the province will decide on the governance model that will change every 3 years, which we know how long it takes for them to appoint provincial appointees. the concern at the Conservation Authority that I sit on and at others is that creating another level of provincial oversight does not speed up the process. We are certainly open and happy that the province is considering providing all of the conservation authorities with the same tools which the smaller conservation authorities have struggled to obtain, which could potentially make permitting easier, faster, more efficient. But another level of oversight, the question about how it's going to be funded when the province has already cut conservation funding in half, which never kept up with inflation, is a concern, definitely. Stay tuned. The CAOs, the general managers, Conservation Ontario, the chairs, they're meeting regularly, they're monitoring, they're asking questions, there's information sessions being offered that they're actively pursuing. This is, again, the province creating another change at the end of the year, the fee freezes, which we're currently operating at about, well, it'll be deteriorated even more now because at 2022, we were at 47% cost recovery. Development was not paying for development. So there's a lot of things that are being considered. We're looking at the benefits of this, but also expressing the concerns. So I think council supporting or providing our comments through the ERO process just adds another layer of voice to the consultation. And I really do appreciate you taking the time. Another report on what this means for Southgate, what this means for conservation is very much appreciated.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else? Martin, go ahead. Oh, Monica, and I see Monica next.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I totally concur with what Barb said. You know, there's an old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it, or something like that. And Ken, always a pleasure reading your report. I agree with every comment that you made, and I'll probably end up sending you a couple too. This is when you look at the subject, you know, free flowing water and how they can make up these delineated lines and regions. And again, as you said, we're still under two authorities, even with the changes. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I think we should all make our comments known, and there's certainly a lot of pushback on this. So just kudos for the report.
Thanks, Martin. Monica, go ahead.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Ken. Sorry,
Sure.
Ken, did you want to respond first?
Yeah, through your worship, just was going to say to Councillor Shipston, my intention was actually subject to, you know, council just accepting the comments as they were, was to submit essentially today or tomorrow. If you have additional feedback, I can hold off because we have until December 22nd. Just let me know if you could get it to me by the end of the week, though, that would be helpful.
No, I think if you want to get that in, it's pertinent to get that in as fast as you, well, no, but as I said, everybody here, even if you're a private citizen, can make a comment on an ERO. So there's no need to make any more effort for you. Just, I would send it in. So,
okay, thanks.
Monica, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just through you and do concur with a lot of the things that were mentioned just now. Just to you, Ken, as well, I did appreciate your report and also about the 3-year review. Yeah, that is alarming. I just wanted to have a comment and a question. I do appreciate staff's thorough work on this. And at this point, I also have serious concerns about scale, accountability, and co-risk. Watersheds are inherently local, and direction being proposed control while diluting the service is concerning. So until there is clarity on cost exposure, reporting, and transition framework, I do not believe this model improves environmental protection for our residents. And with that comment, I just had a question with regards to, is there an appeal process that if there was decisions that had been made or with the OPCA directives harming the local environmental outcomes, would there be essentially an appeal process in place?
Yeah.
Through your worship, we'd have to stay tuned to see how they adopt everything. At this point, it's all theoretical. My instinct would say likely not.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think the short answer would be no.
mm.
You
Can I
never
fo-
know. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. That's interesting. So with that also, what assurance do municipalities have, or do we even have any assurance that service levels won't decline under this mega, conservation authority? Do we have any assurance on that?
Ken?
Through your worship, the simple answer is none.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add though, in terms of your question about if the provincial agency overrides, this goes back to the concern about accountability. So if they're publishing these decisions every 3 years, we're never going to know until 3 years later that this even occurred, except potentially if one of the regional conservation authorities circulates that decision to its members. So I would take your comment as perhaps something to add into our feedback, but I think it's already covered mostly with what we have anyway.
Okay, Barb?
Thank you. And can you just reminded me of another clause, much like the provincial planning statement and the municipal affairs and housing and their ability to override a planning decision. They also have included a clause that states that the province, the minister, can override a permit or non-permit through the conservation authority. So there's also that. So to your point, we haven't had any success appealing Bill 17 or I can't even remember all the numbers. There's been 69 and 60 and 30, whatever. As much as the planners and conservation authorities and other agents try to communicate to the province that this is not going to help speed up development or build more homes faster or make homes less expensive. They are on a trajectory and we'll see where it goes. They are, in fairness, they are in consultations now, at least, and having a dialogue. So we're hoping that we can convey some of those concerns to them and we'll see how the legislation rolls out.
Question? Comment? Question? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was just on the talk about the planning aspect of, the permits from the conservation area and how we've been talking about everything, quite a bit of hypothetical and theoretical things this morning. I just had a thought pop into my head and not be relevant. Maybe it'll be a comment I'll send in. It's funny though, that they've regionalized the conservation authorities and they're in the process of making all these economic zones, special economic zones. And isn't it funny that water is one of the most used raw materials in processing, even if it's agriculture? So it's affecting planning everywhere. And I wouldn't be surprised if something like that goes down the road. So that's just hypothetically a comment.
Okay, thank you. Ken?
Actually, Jim beat
Oh,
me to
Jim, go ahead.
I just wanted, last Friday, I had Grey County staff reach out about writing a report for county council. And if the municipal lower tiers would have any comments, so I forwarded Ken's report up to them.
Very good. Thanks, Jim.
Sorry,
Ken.
just wanted to add that in preparing the report, Bill had actually suggested one additional comment that kind of came, we just missed each other, related to the upkeep and maintenance of, this is something I think we should speak to, the Conservation Authority parks that they have. We have a number of them throughout. And if that's okay, your worship, I'll just add that into our comments.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, they do own a number and maintain a number of properties for sure, the public have become used to using. Monica, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to those points, just for clarity through you to Ken, has the province, you may have already answered this, so forgive me, but has the province already provided a transition plan for staff, for data, for permits and services? And if not, I'm just wondering why, if you know, would council be expected to comment without this information?
Yeah.
For your worship, once again, simple answer is no. And in fact, that's part of the comments that we've included is there doesn't seem to be any transition plan, and how is that going to look? I think it's fair to say that many of the municipality planning agencies are very concerned that if this moves the way some other things have gone, and the commenting period closes, and then suddenly the legislation is passed, we're into a scenario on a random day after getting a note from the minister that now everything is live, and it's okay, now we have to build this airplane as we go. So we've included comments about what is the transition plan? Is the province even going to put one together? The one thing that they have said is that there are no planned staff reductions at this point. But that doesn't appear to actually be included. It is repeated in the ERO. So, I mean, I take it as it is and as it's stated.
Yep.
Just a follow-up, Chair.
Well, I'm just trying to be mindful of the time here, but go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for that answer, Ken. One last question I was going to ask was with regards to financial risk. If are we able to at this point also confirm whether or not municipalities could see an increase in the cost under this model, despite the statements that the province will fund OPCA?
For your worship, there's no guarantees whatsoever.
Okay.
My instinct would say we would see cost increases,
Okay.
but that's just my opinion.
Barb?
I just wanted to comment on the parks and properties that you mentioned through you and Ken. The SVCA alone manages over 20,000 acres of properties that have been either purchased at a very low rate or donated by landowners. There's quite a number of them in our own municipality. That is one of the areas of concern or questioning as to the acquisition of assets by this new agency and how we protect the commitment of those donations going forward. Because in the Planning Act, and the previous change to the Conservation Authorities Act was that some of those lands, if they were purchased with provincial dollars, could be converted to development. This is another angle that the conservation authorities are commenting on, and Conservation Ontario is commenting on, is how do we protect the assets that have been donated in good faith by a landowner? So thank you for bringing that up.
Yep. No, that is a concern for sure. All right. Not seeing any further questions or discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Public Works Department. We have a report here from Corey discussing the issues with well 4 and resolutions and pricing to mitigate the challenges that we see on that well. Someone cared. Barb will move. Martin will second. Welcome, Corey. Thank you for your patience, for waiting. Go ahead.
Thank
Floor
you,
is yours.
Mr. Mayor and Council. So this report, is on well 4 resolutions and pricing. So when we had the turbidity issues in the spring or in the summer, we had a company called Lotto Water come in and investigate, and they found 3 issues. First was a hole in the casing. Second was that the well was to be found underperforming. And the third was that the discharge piping was too small and restricting the flow. To resolve those issues, the first one is to install a liner inside the existing casing and then seal it. They just wanted to make sure that this was going to be a suitable test, so they did what is called a Packer test, and after that test, they found that the quality of the water was good and there was a good volume of water. So to resolve the issue of the underperforming well, they did what's called airlifting and acidifying testing. It's basically to increase the size of the pores coming into the well, and that was found to produce good results as well, which you can see in attachment 2. It basically almost brought it back to original state. And then for the restriction of the discharge piping, it's recommended to increase the size from 75 millimeters to 100 millimeters, and also change that piping material to stainless steel, which is what also the new liner is going to be, just to increase the lifespan of that piping. And then the options are right now to also replace the well pump while we're doing the work. So this existing well pump was installed in 2017 when the discharge piping failed. And at that point, they decided to replace the pump. So it's 8 years old. I've been trying to get lifespans on well pumps. You get all different answers: 12 to 16 years, 8 to 14 years. This well pump runs for about 7 hours a day currently. That could increase if population increases and demand increases. But I do recommend installing the stainless steel to increase the lifespan of that piping. I did ask the person yesterday what it would cost, just labor cost, to come in, replace the pump, and it was roughly about $8,000 of labor. So if it failed in, say, 2 to 3 years from now, if we stick with the old pump, that would be the labor cost with the parts on top of that. So I'd take any further questions or.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Are there any questions? Barb?
Thank you. And through you, the 8 hours that the pump runs, it's well 4, so it feeds the water tower, correct?
So the well pumps actually feed the reservoir. All the wells currently fill the water tower.
Okay.
From about 7 at night till a certain time in the morning.
Right. And if we didn't have the water tower, which would work during the day, then they would be operating all the time.
The high lift pumps. So before the water tower, there's always a high lift pump running, and we would alternate throughout the wells throughout the day. Now we're still doing that same concept, but we're doing it all from 7 at night till, say, 5 in the morning to fill the tower and let it drain during the day.
Awesome.
So we would just spread those times out if the water tower didn't exist.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Corey, the cost to replace the water pump, you said was about $8,000. Is that cost factored into your proposal here to do the water pump now?
So they have a total cost of about 70,000, and that includes that new pump.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I guess the other question I'd have, is there any residual value in that water pump, or is it scrap when it comes out of there?
There's thoughts of like keeping it on the shelf, but I don't realistically see whenever we would put a used pump in.
Right, okay. Jason?
I was just wondering, Corey, what is the cost of a new well? I mean, by the time we put liners in and have a new pump, like to drill a new well, what would it be cost roughly?
I don't have that number in front of me. I could look into that. For you.
$1.80 plus tax likely. Martin, go ahead.
Corey, we talked about this before, and the hole, was it a crack or an actual hole? You did mention to me how that happened, and could that be a possible scenario for the other wells, depending on what the casings are made of?
So I think it was a
Something to look
hole.
at?
It's definitely a possibility at each well. Just over time, things rot. So I think in the future going forward, I think stainless steel is the way to go, even on the new. And to your point, we are looking at well 6, and it's a 5-year process to get a new well drilled and everything too. I don't know what cost, but just to throw that out there as well. But yeah, it's definitely possible at every well and every discharge piping.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any further questions. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Corey. We have no notice of motion, or is there any notice of motion? Not seeing any. Consent agenda. There's a number of items there. Did anybody wish any of those to be removed for further discussion or direction? If not, I'd take a motion to receive those items in the consent agenda. Barb and Jim will second. All those in favor? That is carried. Announcements. Does anybody have any general announcements they'd like to share? Barb?
Yes, thank you. And through you, the Dundalk Santa Claus Parade is this Saturday at 6 p.m. And the Holstein Santa Claus Parade is next Saturday at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else? I would just add that the Holstein Drama Group is doing a reading of A Christmas Carol this Friday and Saturday night. And if you want to hear a good rendition of Jacob Marley's Ghost, come on out and give it a listen. Scrooge. County clerk cut me off before I could get that one out very well. So thank you, Madam Clerk. Anyone else? No? Okay. Sorry. Yes, I guess I could mention that. The new warden for Grey County is Andrea Matrosovs. She's the mayor of Blue Mountains. She was inducted on last night in Owen Sound. It's been a busy week. So we congratulate her, and she was the warden last year, so she'll do a great job. So continues on the notion of wardens having 2 years in a row. Anyone else? Okay. Bylaws. We have one bylaw there to deal with the zoning bylaw amendment that we considered earlier for Amon Bauman. Someone care to move that, please? Jason, seconded by Jim. All those in favor? That is carried. We have no closed meetings today. We have confirming bylaw to consider. Joan, would you like to move that one? Okay, Joan moves that. Is there a seconder? Jim, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. One more motion to adjourn. Jason and Jim. All those in favor? We are adjourned. The meeting for budget considerations, or what are we calling it? Financial forecasting meeting